This episode of the Fight Within podcast is presented to you by Meguiar's. For over 115 years, Meguiar's has been carefully creating and producing advanced formulas with cutting-edge chemistry to deliver a show car perfect appearance. Whether you're showing on the fairway, finalizing your car for auction, or simply getting your beloved car ready for a weekend drive, Meguiar's is ready to help with their premium car care products to make every automotive surface look its absolute best. Meguiar's, reflect your passion. Make sure to visit them at meguiars.com.
What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Fight Within podcast. Today's guest is Casey Whitson, who is the president and CEO of Optimize Financial. Thank you so much for coming on. Did I say it right? Optimize?
You nailed it.
Every
time. I told you, every time.
So, again, like every episode, let's dive right in and just tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into wanting to open up your own firm.
Yeah, so I was raised in Los Angeles and went off to the Air Force Academy, and that's a military college, and was there for 4 years, graduated as an officer. I competed there in athletics and graduated as an officer, and you have to serve 5-year commitment after. So I was I ended up serving 6.5 years. So once you graduate, you immediately get assigned to a base and you start managing people. And I had a financial advisor my last couple of years of the academy I started working with. He had been an academy grad, just awesome guy, great mentor. And when I was in the Air Force as an officer, I used to talk to him all the time, and he kept saying, Casey, you got to come into this business. Like, you're perfect for it. Like, you love people and you love this. Like, every time I talk to you, just like eat up everything I'm talking about. And so he gave me some really great advice back then. He was just like, hey, if you have any inkling to get into this business, he's like, you need to become the money person to your friends and your family and people in your circle. And so I just started studying everything I could get my hands on, about just wealth building. And so then, fast forward, managing teams of people, lots of government resources. And then I started my last assignment in the Air Force. I went to USC, University of Southern California, to run the operations of the Air Force ROTC unit there. And so while I was there, I started my MBA program.
Okay.
And so I was in that MBA program. And at the same time, two of my best friends from the Air Force are married. They were living with me. And I was helping them with all their, financial stuff, like questions, just walking them through things. And so they just kept saying, pretty much every day I came home, they'd be like, so when are you getting out of the Air Force to start your business? Like, this is what you should be doing. Like, every time Brian would be like, every time I talk to you, like every time you're sharing and teaching me this stuff, you're just like light up. Like, I just see like this life come to you. He's like, so when are you doing this? And I just kept saying, dude, you're crazy. I'm not getting out, starting my business. My daughter had just been born, and I was just like, I'm not, I'm good. And I was, enjoying my time in the Air Force and being up at USC. But then that first year of my MBA program, they make you run through like business plans and put, business ideas and how would you launch this business and get it off the ground. And one of my buddies who was in the Air Force with me and went to the academy, he was in my small group with me at business school. And one day he told me, I was like, oh, so what are you going to do, man? Are you staying in? Like, when are you going to, what's your next assignment, whatever? He's like, no, actually, I'm getting out pretty soon, like probably within the next year. I was like, wait, what? What are you going to do? And he was like, I'm going to go work for, this startup or whatever. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I remember just being like, like, and at the same time, I had a boss in the military, and I learned a lot from him. But I kind of decided after that experience, I was like, okay, I don't ever want to have a boss anymore. I was like, I would like to be the boss, And so it was just kind of, there were some boundaries and stuff like with, time and all that. And again, learned a ton, super grateful for that time. But it was the catalyst I needed, like, hey, start considering this. So I started putting together business plans to be like, what would it look like if I started my own practice, and in wealth management, and started running all these Excel models and, and then presenting them in class and working through them. And I started being like, maybe I can do this, and Brian was relentless. He was just like, every day I came home, okay, so when you getting out, it was just like, I'm like, dude. Then finally, everything kind of came together, and I just was like, you know what, I can do this. Like after I was, in the MBA program, I'm like, okay, all these people are starting these businesses or whatever it is. I was like, maybe I can do this. And so then I kind of went around figuring out, trying to see what firm I would want to house my business at, because you have to have a place where you have your clients' accounts and all that. And I had some connections at Wells Fargo Advisors with our really good friends, his brother-in-law. So I ended up deciding to go to his branch. And so he was an amazing mentor. But essentially back then in our industry, it was like sink or swim. It was like, they give you the platform, they give you the, the train, like a couple month training, they get you a license, and they're like, good luck building a business, right? And so, at Wells Fargo, I wasn't sitting in a bank, I was in a brokerage office. And so it was just like, hey, you got to go find your clients and build your business. And Wally was awesome. This was the mentor. And so I had figured out, when I was in the Air Force, my last assignment before USC, I was managing a group of probably about 60 people, and they were like, 40 plus, and many of them within like 10 years of retirement. And so I got a reputation for knowing about, investing and wealth building. And so they would come ask me questions, during the day. And I was just always surprised, because I knew a lot of them were successful. But I was really surprised at how kind of like arbitrary a lot of their financial decisions were. Like I was like, why are you doing this? And why haven't you done this? And like they would come and like show me their financial picture, and I would just like, in a couple seconds, I could spot like all the inefficiencies. I'm like, okay, that, is inefficient here. This is inefficient. I could just see everything compounding, over time. They couldn't see it, right? They're like, oh, I think I'm doing what I should be doing. And I was like, why are people so like it's just like willy-nilly, like I should be doing it. And then on top of that, I was really impressed by the fact that I felt like people did not enjoy the process of wealth building. Like they were always stressed, about what the stock market's doing or what real estate's doing, or having major FOMO because somebody else has this. And I'm like, why are people just like constantly living in this like wealth building is like this really, stressful process, right? And I was just like, this just doesn't seem like there's something missing here. If this many people, and some of these people were wealthy, right? So I was like, all right, like there's a different way of doing this. And so I just started in my MBA program, I started really researching, okay, like the wealthiest people, like what are commonalities between those people? And I started building my process based on, essentially what I found was what made people very successful. And so I just started building a very disciplined process, very clear process. And then I decided I'm going to base my entire practice around planning, because what I figured out was that none of these people had a financial plan. And you guys know the statistics. It's like, if you write your goals down, if you literally just get out a piece of paper and you scratch like your goals out, like, and that's simple, and you start tracking them, you're 40% more likely to actually achieve them. Yeah. And they said they've done this multiple times at Harvard, but if the people in the program that there was 3% of people that in the MBA program that wrote down their goals, their income goals and career goals. And those 3% made more than the rest combined. Those 3% made more money and income than the rest of the 97% put together. Wild. So it's like go do that. Massive, And so I literally just started basing it around the plan and this very simple process. And it just, it was, I mean, don't get me wrong. You guys know you've being involved in building a business, but the first 2 years were a grind, where it's like you're constantly meeting, you're, obviously, but, I didn't meet with one person who had ever seen a true financial plan and who had ever implemented a financial plan before. And so, and to be honest, who had ever been spoken to by a financial advisor in such a caring way, to be able to, and Scott says this, Scott works for me and, as you guys have known for years, but he's been in wealth management for, I think, over, 20 years or something. And he's like, the fact that we have a very disciplined process that when our clients come in, it's like we make sure they're going to meet their goals and we don't allow their mindsets and their behaviors to detract from that, right? Like it's like we're helping them, coaching them. And so that's become a big piece of what we do now, is because we were just talking about this. We're putting together kind of an upcoming challenge that we're doing, a 3-day free challenge for people. But the big thing of it is like what I've noticed now after helping people build wealth, like significant wealth, in our process, there's one thing to like build wealth. And then it's another piece to actually like have a healthy, mental state when you have that wealth, right? So if someone starts out here and they get to this, next level of wealth, but they carry all the unhealthy and inefficient mindsets that they had down here, they're just more prone to making really poor decisions up here. So one of the things that makes us unique in what we do and what I focused on from the beginning was really helping people actually go from, hey, I've got, getting them to see that they have a lot of unhealthy mindsets when it comes to wealth, getting that plan in place and being like, okay, guys, I want to grow my wealth and I want to get there also as a healthy wealth builder. So that's like what we really focus on. But yeah, it essentially took off and we've, it was just, we've refined our approach and just had an amazing experience with a lot of our clients, just seeing their lives transformed. And then in 2021, I transitioned from being an independent advisor at Wells to having my own RIA. And now we clear through Charles Schwab, which that was an awesome, big deal, big situation. It was like my own entity. If we can brand, we can do all the things we want to do with like our marketing and our process. Just, we were, being at Wells was wonderful. I feel like it taught me a lot of structure and it was just a great place to build. But where we're headed with just the level of client service that we want to provide, and then also just with the efficiency, becoming an RIA was the next step and something we were able to do, thank the Lord.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, but yeah.
So for people that don't understand like what that means, basically that means like, to make it like super simplified, that you again went from like hosting essentially or using like Wells Fargo to doing your own thing, but still going through Charles Schwab. But I think people don't realize like what that really means. Like when you go from, like you said, using Wells Fargo like brokerage to being able to do what you just did. That's awesome. That's super cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I wanted to say, well, one, thank you for your service in the Air Force. That's really cool.
Appreciate it.
Two, what did you do? This has nothing to do with anything you just said, but I want to genuinely know, like, what did you do in the Air Force? Like, what was your job?
Yeah, great question. So I was in the space side. So I worked in the GPS, it was called program office at the time. So, GPS that you guys have on your phones. So the GPS system is actually an Air Force owned asset. So the Air Force manages the satellite constellation and, everything to do with GPS. And they allow civilians to use a certain signal, you guys have receivers in your phone and stuff. And military GPS is different from civilian GPS in that it's more precise. So it's a protected technology that we have. So I worked on the military side and I worked in protecting our military receivers.
Okay.
Because I consider it a wartime advantage. If you're bombing a location or looking for a target, if you're using the military, it's like you're going to be very precise.
Yeah, like getting a 10-digit grid versus
and so we protect that technology really well. And so I was involved in that side of it with our allies who we allow to use it. And, so it was actually awesome in the sense that, I got leadership management experience and then also had to learn organization and accountability. And, but yeah, it was.
I said, the question mattered only because I wanted to see, it depended on your answer though. You could have said something totally different,
Yeah.
but I was hoping you didn't, and you didn't. So thank you. But I asked that just because I could, just by listening to you and how you've been able to go from, you know, like before we started recording, you're obviously a very athletic person. You've played a lot of sports. You played at the Air Force Academy, which is like a major accomplishment in itself. But you've been able to do all these things in a very task-oriented way. And listening to you describe how you decided to start your business, it seemed as if you were semi-working in a role within the Air Force that was enabling you to kind of take some of those like same practices and structure and implement them into what you do now. And so hearing that you worked on like the GPS side of things, which makes a little bit more sense to me now, because you have like the analytical side behind you to be able to like see, hey, this needs to go here, this needs to go there, and provide that structure to it.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, you worked with, like you said, you had a huge accountability doing what you did, and going into financial like planning and wealth building, like that's people's essentially like livelihood, right? Like you're helping people build wealth so they can continue to live or build generational wealth or whatever their goals are. There's a huge accountability process that goes to that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I asked. I wanted to see if there was a correlation between your military service and what you're doing now, because it's a fun thing for me. I was in the Marine Corps. I don't know if I shared that with you. So that's why I'm curious about your answer, because for me in business, when I started, a lot of people asked me like how I did it, and it was, you already said it, but it was just pure grunt work. It was put your head down and just keep going until, like, for lack of better terms, not to sound cheesy, but until the mission is accomplished, right? Yeah. And if the mission isn't accomplished, you just keep going and going and going and going and adapting and changing and driving and pivoting and moving and going and just moving. And for me, like, that's the only reason why I'm at where I'm at today. Well, and like obviously like God opening doors for me, but besides that, like, it was my drive and the things that I learned, the structure that I learned, the accountability that I had to learn, the leadership styles that I loved, the leadership styles that I hated, and like, you know, taking bits and pieces from every single person that, you know, I was underneath or worked with, and like building your own leadership and structure style. And but the opposite side of that, I've had military people just that do the complete opposite and don't use any of the stuff that they were taught or trained or did. So that's kind of why I asked that in a roundabout way.
It's so true. And I think too, just like knowing what I know now, as well as like, you know, I do believe we are gifted with, you know, it's like, I would always wonder this. I'm like, why can't I like read through a deferred compensation plan and just like easily understand every part of it? How can I take someone's financial picture and I can, in like 10 seconds, I can like get a idea for where all the inefficiencies are? Like, why does my brain work like this? You know, because I didn't come from money. My parents actually lived paycheck to paycheck, lost our house to bankruptcy. Like, it was like I didn't come from any training, right, as a kid. So I was just like, why does this stuff like come naturally, right? And so then it's like, obviously now, you know, I believe and know that the Lord has endowed me with certain gifts, right? And then the cool part about it is now I can look back in my history. It's like God needed me to pick up certain things, right, along the way, and placed me in these jobs to like pick up those things that would obviously kind of catapult a new way of thinking in this industry, a new way of, like you said, the accountability was a piece that I feel like was lacking from what I had seen in the industry. And like, that's one of the crucial parts of this job, is like making sure people are tracking and doing all the things that they need to be doing to build that wealth, right? So yeah, it was just really cool to now go back. And that's why, you know, I speak at USC once a year to the business school, the freshmen at the business school. And it's like, you know, a lot of these kids think they're just going to get into the job that is like, oh, this is my passion. And I'm always telling them, like, guys, like, you're not going to get into your first job that's your passion initially, but every single job is going to provide you with something for what you end up doing, right? And then it's also going to provide you, if you can do that job with excellence, whatever it is, however mundane it is, there's going to be people that are attracted to you, and they're like, I got to take this person further because they took this mundane job and did it really well, and it's like every single thing like built on itself to like, exactly what you said. It's like all those little skills that I learned in the Air Force totally transposed to this business, even though on the surface it might look like they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right? So
Have you guys ever experienced someone doing the opposite? Like thinking, not just wanting to learn, and I've experienced it with people like, yes, they go from one job to the next and they learn something wherever they're at. But have you guys experienced the opposite in the sense that someone is trying to push in doing something because they're passionate about it when it's the wrong thing for them? Like where maybe they're not meant to be there. They're not gifted in certain areas, but they keep trying to make this thing happen in the wrong industry, in the wrong field, maybe the wrong profession, however you want to label it. How would you guys deal with that, or tell someone that's like, hey man, you're not doing the right thing, or this isn't meant for you, your talents and your gifts aren't in this field, go do this or whatever?
Are you talking about from like the employment side, like the employer side?
From both, because it's I feel like that sometimes. That's why I'm asking, because I'm like, oh yeah, you do digital marketing, but like, are you really good at this? Are you the best at that? Not just with self-doubt, but I'm like, there's all these walls that I keep hitting, and other people have hit too that I've talked to, and they're like, yeah, well, I just had a pivot, or I realized I was in the wrong industry, or whatever. But have you guys ever witnessed someone as an employer that is maybe trying to stay on this path and they're just not meant for that?
Yeah, well, I'll say my experience was when I was at USC. I initially started the post-baccalaureate program to start the process of going to medical school, or getting the rest of the credits I needed to start that.
Yeah.
And during that, I was like shadowing some doctors, because I was like, hey, obviously I had this desire to serve and be with people, and so naturally I kind of looked to medicine, and meanwhile Joe, my advisor, is like, Casey, come over here, like you're so much more equipped for, like, this is where you should be, like this is what you love. But I started down that path and started the program and everything, and then going and shadowing and learning about what it looks like to be a doctor on the day-to-day. And it was like through that process it started making me realize, okay, this isn't what I'm looking for. Right? This definitely doesn't look like what I thought it would look like. And so then I started, okay, now let me go check this out. This is my other option. And so it was like, my ROTC cadets would always be so lost about like, oh, I don't know what major or what to do. And I'm like, pick a course, set a course. Now knowing what I know, obviously I would be like letting the Lord kind of guide that process and praying. But at the time I was not walking with the Lord. And so it's like, but he thankfully was so good that he helped guide me by process of elimination. But I just told the ROTC cadets, set a course, start going towards it, and naturally things are going to fall off. As long as you're teachable and coachable and you're open to feedback, you're going to figure out, okay, and the employment side, employees, we have, once a month feedback sessions. We give them goals and set these goals. And so it's like finding out, what is this person, what are their gifts and talents, right? And then to answer your question though, is many times in that instance where it's like they keep going for this thing that it's like, man, your skills don't point to that, they point to this. If you get to the underlying and you find out what's driving that, usually you can figure it out. It might be like, I think that's where I can make money, right? And they don't quite see like how they could, benefit just as much, or if not more, in what they're actually gifted in.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's just like kind of getting down to the lies that they might be thinking about, oh, this is the glamorous and this is where I need to be, to like, no, you're actually gifted here. And if you do this really well, this is going to launch you way farther than you could go here. Right. But yeah, good question.
That's good. I like that. Did you, backtracking just a little bit, did you want to go into the military?
Yeah, since I was probably about 5 years old.
Okay.
So I was like 5, this little like 5-year-old kid, and I told my dad, I was like, yeah, Dad, I want to be in the military. And he was like, I was a total tomboy, shocker. But I was just like, I associated the military with like, doing outdoor things, and my brother was my idol. I just loved being with my big brother, and I just like was always like attracted to the military.
That's
and
cool.
So I told my dad that, and he's like, oh yeah, but you want to go to college too, right? And I'm like 5. I'm like, yeah, totally, Dad. Yeah, definitely. He's like, okay, well, why don't you look at the military academies? Because you can be in college and be in the military at the same time. And I'm like, perfect. So I'm like, I literally I'm pretty sure it was like 5, maybe like 6. I just start sending off for information at the military academies, and they're laughing. They would send me little postcards like, oh, thanks for your interest, check back in 10 years, So I just would, anything I could find with the military, any event my parents would take me to, I'd go. And that's just, how I ended up going down that path. So,
that's awesome.
That's pretty rad.
That's so funny.
It was funny.
Whereas there's not a lot of people that would want, or not just want, but to be able to identify that at such a young age.
Yeah.
And to say like, hey, this is what I want to do, and this is what I feel that my calling is because it's still service. Like you're essentially doing the same thing now, and serving other people and helping them with their financial goals and wealth building. It looks a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think it's neat, and I'm a little late on this, but thank you for your service.
Appreciate it.
I should have probably said that in the beginning.
Hey man, it's all good.
I had something in my head. I was like, you got to say this.
You said it. That's all that matters.
But I think it's what were you able to take things from, and you kind of answered it, but what do you think had the biggest impact on you transitioning from being in the military, probably feeling like you're fulfilling your purpose and what you've always wanted to do and living out your passions, to then going and looking at numbers and planning? And I mean, it's crazy because it's hard. Like, I was a professional athlete, so I go from being a professional athlete to sitting behind a computer, and people were like, you're crazy. I would never think that you would do that.
Yeah.
But to me, it's the same way. It's like, oh, I get to serve. If I'm good at something, I get to help a company, with a little bit of their success, but what would you say helped you transition from being a service member to now being a civilian and having to kind of change your direction or path of what you were doing?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to answer this question a little bit different because I think there is some good background context, but so I would say my first years in the military, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily like, I would say I wish, I could do those over again. I came out of the academy, I went into the academy fairly lost. Like my dad had left when I was 10, didn't really see him much from 10 on. And then my mom moved to Hawaii right before my senior year of high school. So I was like, on my own my last year. I didn't want to move to Hawaii because I was like so focused on getting in an academy, and I was at a great high school that had, was working with me to get all my credits and stuff. And so, but I was, pretty really involved in church up until about my senior year of high school. And then I just started kind of doing my own thing and, going down to all my friends who were in college and hanging out with them on the weekends. And so I went into the academy, and like, I always had a little bit of this like rebelliousness towards like authority. And so when I went there, I was just kind of like always trying to figure out ways to like kind of, because it's a very structured environment. And, I did well. I did, it was like, I didn't obviously like get the best grades when I was there, but I was very involved. I was doing athletics, and it was like, I had a good experience, but I'd say like my attitude wasn't what I would, if I look back now and I had that structure and, had that healthy family system, like it probably would have been different. And God was so gracious that he gave me kind of these adopted families that would pour into me and really did keep me somewhat grounded during that time frame. So I went through the academy and I got out, and, academy grads are kind of notorious for their first couple of years because they were in such a structured environment in college. They kind of go party and go crazy after, So, I was kind of like a little immature as my first couple of years as an officer, and just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm in the beach cities, partying it up, and, oh yeah, I'm doing what I can and getting all my work done and stuff like that. But it was like, my mindset wasn't there. And I was there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't dealt with, like a lot of pain, a lot of just, things I had not let come to the surface and really start to work through those, And so this guy he was my peer for a while, and he became my boss at one point. And he finally sat me down, and he was the first person to sit me down and be like, Case, like, you've got all these gifts and talents, but he's like, you're not going to accomplish the things you want to if you keep just operating this way without discipline and just kind of thinking you're above the system. He's like, and people were letting me get away with it because they were like afraid to say something. Like they were afraid to give me feedback. Yeah. Right. Because I was like the fun, cool officer, surfer. And so it was like nobody, and he finally had the guts, and he wasn't even someone like where me and him were like, I looked at him as like a mentor and really tight, but he had the guts to sit down and just tell me like, hey, what do you want? And like, you're in danger of not accomplishing the things that you want because you're not being disciplined, and you act like you're above the system. And so like it really hit me. Like just that one conversation, no joke, like overnight I literally changed. And I just went from being like, thinking I was hot stuff and just doing my own thing and and I got really serious about my job and my leadership role. And then I had my daughter, which again, just like, I'm like, man, I want to be setting her up and a good example for her. So my leadership just went a whole nother trajectory after that, and just really started, I always say I did a TED talk on self-discipline and talk about this, but it was like I started doing what I would say I was going to do in the best possible manner at the time that I said I was going to do it. And so that literally launched that. And then those last couple of years that I had in the Air Force, I just made the absolute most of them. And I'm so grateful for that guy. He was the one person who had the guts to sit me down and let me know what was going on and give me some true, honest feedback. And it rocked me and it changed me. And so I think about that with my team now. It's like we have a feedback-seeking culture at our office. And I used to always be like afraid of feedback. Like when I was, I hated giving feedback, and we have this culture that just thinks feedback's like punishment. And it's like, we've created a culture where we all want that feedback. And so, we're getting to the point, I'm seeing the people on our team just totally transform overnight because we sit down and we have these conversations. They feel loved. They feel they're in a trusting environment. They know we're not out to just like stick it to them. We want to see them grow and mature. And so it's just like phenomenal to watch people, grow. People want to know if they are doing what is required for them to be successful in their position. Sure. And if you're not giving them goals and you're not telling them, they have no idea, right? So anyways, I know I kind of went around, answered a couple different things, but it wasn't, I don't want to give off the vibe that it's like I had it all figured out, and was doing all the right things. It took making mistakes and getting some really tough feedback for me to change my ways and launch me into what I was meant to launch into. And
so what do you do now for yourself? Because you just talked about how you give your employees, like, here's these feedback sessions, here are the goals, we're going to hold you accountable. Who does that for you, or how do you do it for yourself?
Yeah, excellent question. I ask feedback from my team. So at the end of every feedback session, I ask them for feedback. And so they give me real feedback, Nice. And so we take and assess exactly what they say. And one of the things, I'd say my time with the Lord, my devotionals in the morning, I'm just always asking, Lord, soften my heart, show me where I'm off, if I never make rash decisions anymore. It's like back in the day, my earlier years, it's like, just like make hey, I'm feeling this way and this is how it's going to be. It's like I take time to pray if I'm having a tough decision that I got to make, or I'm struggling with something in like the leadership. It's like the Lord is constantly like softening my heart and making me teachable and coachable. So I'm just like, I know I have a lot to learn. And I think that's the thing, going to Ocean's prayer and worship time on Tuesdays, it's like God's constantly just, showing in the most loving way, because that's how he is. But it's like, I'm like, Lord, I don't want anything that is going to hinder me from being the best leader I can be and having the impact with this business that you want me to have. if there's something in me that I need to take care of, like, show me. And most people just, and to be honest, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs have a really hard time seeing their blind spots. And I'm working with a guy named Keith Ferrante, who's been incredible, but his whole goal is to get entrepreneurs super healthy, make sure that they are aware of their blind spots, because those blind spots can be the downfall of many an entrepreneur. So I'm like, show them to me. Scott Chio is really good at showing me my blind spots. So, he came into the organization, and total, miracle story about that. But initially we were kind of like butting heads a lot. And it was because he was highlighting all of the inefficiencies in the business. And like, he was my biggest champion. He was like, Casey, your process is incredible. I've never seen this before, but this, and this, and it was like God's grace to bring Scott in to be like, Casey, you've got to see this stuff, and you're not seeing it, but Scott is seeing it. Right. And so that was hard. I had to kind of take like a gut check of, I'd be like, Scott, just work, that's my thought. Like, just work and do your job. He's like, but I'm seeing this glaring thing. Right.
Yeah.
So you got to be willing, and it's the Lord who's brought the people to the table. There's so many crazy stories I could tell you about the people, but it's like, if you're not open and you don't have people on your team that you trust, that they can see things that you don't see, I mean, you're going to miss it,
Well, that's the best part about having a coach, right? But like, people don't think, because I was one of them for a very long time, and I say it all the time now, I wish I would have hired a coach very early in my business career versus waiting 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I'm on my 12th year now. But
wow.
Waiting 10 years before I did it, and the only reason why I did it was because I was getting certified to be a coach. But the coach I went to, Hendry, he was on a couple episodes ago. You should definitely listen to it if you have the time.
Yeah.
It's like listening to that guy talk is like
really
just listening to like a philosopher like speak. He's a wordsmith, but in like a great way where he's not just blowing smoke at you. But like for him and me, like you said, the blind spot thing is such a real thing where, in my personal experience and what I've experienced is like, yeah, like we have those blind spots, but those blind spots are also part of the reason why we are so good at what we do. So it's like that double-edged sword. If you can take those blind spots with healthy criticism or constructive criticism and turn around and like use those blind spots to now like navigate you to like continue to go the direction you need to go.
Yeah.
Again, in my experience, it's been something that's awesome.
Totally.
But finding the blind spots are hard, and hearing them sometimes is hard.
Yeah.
But like I said, it took me 10 years, a decade, before I finally was like, I need to do this. And it wasn't even because I decided to get a coach. It was because he was coaching me as an example on how to coach. And Hendry opened up so many things that I kind of always sensed were there, but like they became clear, right? Like the blurriness became clear.
Yeah.
But we were saying like before, like I was telling you before we started recording, but like we really want this to be a platform, for guests and a resource for listeners. And I'm going to throw you on the spot really before we kind of wrap up a little bit, but there's so much that goes to, finances and just the financial industry as a whole, whether it's in business or personal or whatever, nonprofits, churches, everyone has their own form of something financial in their life. Even, I don't mean this in any derogatory way, but even like the homeless person on the street, we all have something financial in our life. And I think it's the one thing besides water that I would say every single person has in common. And going back to being that platform and a resource, what would be 3 things, and you can take a couple seconds to think about it if you need to, or if you already have it, you seem kind of like you already have answers to everything. So I would love for you to be able to just give like 3 things that shows like the Casey way of even thinking about financial planning or wealth building. It's kind of a loaded question, but I think for people listening, like if they were in that position where they're like, hey, like I'm making $100,000 a year. My expenses are only $70,000. Great, I have $30,000 left over, but like I genuinely don't know what to do with it. The stock market's up and down. I can't afford a house in Orange County. I can't afford real estate because that $30,000 is really essentially nothing in Orange County. What would just be like 3 key things that you would kind of give as like an elevator pitch to somebody when they're even thinking about this type of thing?
Got it. Yeah, and the first thing I do is coach them out of the language you're using. Can't. It doesn't go here. It's like, hey, no, let's start talking like, obviously words have power.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually have a pyramid. I have a wealth framework, an OFI. I call it the wealth building machine framework. So the first thing is you got to be teachable and coachable, right? And so I'm going to tell you the layers of the pillar, and then I want to give you kind of an analogy real quick. But so teachability, coachability, having a coach, having a plan, a process, and then wealth at the top of the pyramid. So if you can picture that.
Mm-hmm.
So wealth is the top, and so all of the other layers are obviously a bigger piece of that pyramid, right? And lay the foundation. So people might say, oh, well, you can have wealth without having a process or a plan or having a coach, or being teachable or coachable. Like we know plenty of entrepreneurs who probably aren't. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, you can. So let's say if I stuck you in a room, turned off the lights, put a blindfold on you, and gave you a bunch of boards and some nails and a hammer, you could build a structure, right? You could build something, right? It's like you have the necessary tools to at least build something, right? And then just kind of like, let's throw some other stuff in there. I got a person in there who keeps like slapping you in the face while you're doing it, right? Or keeps like, throwing your wood around while you're trying to nail it in, right? You're still gonna build something, but it would be really nice to know what's coming at you, right? And so, my argument to people is like, oh, well, I've built a bunch of wealth and I haven't had an advisor. And I'm like, you are the example that I just gave. Like, yeah, you've built some wealth, but if you had this pyramid in place and this structure, what might you have built, right? Because we know that the people who have that structure in place statistically have built more wealth than the people that don't. And so it's like, one of the things we talk about in this 3-day challenge that's coming up, our first day, is about knowing your enemies. And I'm like, the question I asked people on our first reel was like, did you know there are forces working against you to build wealth? I was like, it's obvious there are. If there weren't, then everyone would be rich, right? And so it's like, do you even know who your enemies are in wealth building, right? Are you even aware of them? Are you in that room with the lights turned off with the blindfold getting slapped around and you're trying to build a structure? How much better would it be if the lights were flipped on, no blindfold, you're building, you have a team, you have a process, and you know who's coming at you and how you can, essentially take the offensive and build this awesome structure. So, that's our framework kind of boiled down. But it really does start with the teachability, coachability, and just getting out of this mindset that like I can haphazardly build wealth and I've done that up to date and it's okay. And it's like there is another way. And the people that I have talked to who have built wealth that way are not living, they're not enjoying the process, they're not excited about their future, and they're not confident in what they're doing. And so we've taken, our clients are excited about wealth building. They're not stressed right now in the middle of, what's going on with, everybody, the financial media saying there's a recession coming and the stock market's down. Like, they don't care. Like, they're excited, they're enjoying the process, and they have confidence in what they're doing. And it really does. I know it sounds, it's obviously cliche, but it's like you can't help but say it. It's like their lives have been changed. We have people retiring 10 years earlier. We have people who didn't even realize they could buy their dream home in an area that was way above what they ever thought they could making that happen. We have people, being generous when for years they were just worried about, being able to retire. Now they're like giving away wealth and being generous and having an impact on the world. So, keep building wealth in that dark room with the blindfold, or get serious about your wealth building and bring joy and confidence and excitement to the process. And you can do that if you have a wealth building framework. We believe that our process is simple and it's led to our clients being successful. And so that's where we're at.
That's awesome. So if people wanted to find that, where would they find you? We always like to say it out loud because if you're only listening instead of like watching, we like to give like a verbal, because sometimes people won't take the time to literally look in the comments. Oh, here's our website.
Yeah, so optimizefinancial.com is our website. And then we're on Instagram and Facebook, and we have on those pages, we're advertising right now a 3-day free challenge. It's an interactive, essentially like a webinar where they're going to come in every day, and we're going to actually we've never done this before. It's the first time we're doing it. We're going to actually teach the mindsets and some of the process of what we're teaching our clients, so that people can start to realize like there's a different way to do this. And so it's exciting. So yeah, if you go on social media, there'll be a link to, we call it the Battle Ready Challenge, because we want people to be victorious in the battle to build wealth. And so we want people to learn how to do that. So we're going to start that challenge next week, Tuesday. It'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for an hour each day.
I might have to do it.
Literally next week. Today's, yeah. All right.
Yeah, that was good. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time. Make sure you guys go and support it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
So go check out the challenge. Visit the website. I will put Casey's Instagram and the company's Instagram and website on the comments. And just remember to go to the website. Go to thefightwithinpodcast.com. If you guys are interested in sponsoring us, let us know. DM us. Casey, once again, thank you for your service. Thank you for
guys.
coming
This
on
was fun.
and being really awesome to interview and making me feel really dumb. So remember, guys, that everything was impossible until someone did it.